Welcome everyone to another Taking a Break with Gen X Jace and Boomer 2. How's it going, Mike?
I'm due for a break. I mean, the shit that's happening in this country, in this world is fucking crazy. I've had a cold. Uh, so I could use a fucking break. Just talk about stuff that interests us.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because people like we're not talking politics as well. Well, politics is like every freaking day. I mean, with
Yeah.
this administration, I mean you can't get away from it. And I think, I miss the Sleepy Joe days, and I'll go on record for saying that. Because what you're going through now is just one clusterfuck after another.
It
But
really is. And you do need that break. I mean, we're at a time in this country where things seem like they're breaking apart. And
yeah,
people said, "What do we do? What do we do?" I go, at this point, the only thing we can do is stand back and let it crash
yes,
because we've tried all these years to try to inform people and let people know. Some people aren't going to learn until there's a catastrophic crash, and they go, "Oh no, we can't do that." I said, "Well, from those crashes, good things come. Like for example, Social Security came after the Depression. A lot of social nets, safety nets came after the Depression. So the only thing I can hope for is that it crashes quickly and gets done quickly, and then we can move on because we've been fucking wallowing in this shit for so long. And because of that, we're going to talk about shit that has nothing to do with that shit. We're going to talk about pop culture, fun stuff, movies, music, and I think you want to talk about concerts today.
Yeah, I want to, before we get into that, I want to kind of, with all the shit that's going on, with, some of the benefits being cut and everything. And, what this country has really had a hard time with was mental health. And there's
Yeah,
just a lot of people. And this week, there was a young man that played for the Dallas Cowboys,
right.
Maurice Nealon, 24 years old, or Marshawn, excuse me, Marshawn Nealon. Then I started getting texts when it happened and everything. Hey, did you hear about Marshawn? And he had a Cowboys played Monday night. Well, some people would call it playing. Well, they got beat by a really bad Arizona team, and the highlight was a touchdown that he got. And you talk about should being on top. I mean, he was like a second year rookie. He got through college and he made the NFL. I don't people realize how hard it is to get in the NFL. You have people like Minnesota's own Brock Lesnar that didn't make the cut, and that's a tough son
Right.
of a.
Yeah.
But I mean, to make it through the NFL, you just never know what people are going through. And he evidently texted his girlfriend and his family and told them that he was going to kill himself. There was a high speed chase with the Frisco, which is up by Fort Worth and Dallas, and they lost track of him, and then the helicopter found him, and he had unalived himself. So, during this time, check in on your neighbors, check in on your family, the ones that, still talk to you, But I mean, you never know. And it's, or if people are, and I've seen so many people, well, this, that, well, you never know what somebody's going through. And it's just so sad with a young man with so much promise. He had probably had a few bucks in the bank, his whole life ahead of him. And he just thought it was so hopeless that he couldn't get out. He just couldn't escape. There's nothing worse and not being able to escape your own mind. So, I mean, that's just kind of I don't mean to be a downer, but if you got a family and you never know what people are going through. So,
It's funny when you talk about sports or music or entertainment in general. There are so many stories of young people seemingly with everything going for them, either die accidentally or on purpose or through violence. It's truly tragic. It's one thing to want to go out and be successful and famous and all that stuff, but there's a lot of fucking weight you got to carry with that, and some people just aren't built to handle it.
yeah, and I think a lot of it transfers to pop culture too, because you have a lot of musicians that are no longer with us because they couldn't handle the fame or they couldn't
Right,
handle. No, I mean, I think one episode we need to do someday is a 27 Club. I
right.
mean, that is just, I mean, it's probably coincidental, that they all died at 27, but there is a long fucking list of people that died at 27. And I mean, it's just, you have for every, Kurt Cobain or Chris Cornell, you have a Keith Richards. I mean, you have
Right.
somebody that, just, that, like Ozzy and Ace Frehley, they were both drug addicts. They admitted to it, and that's not what got them. I mean, literally, old age got them, and Parkinson's. So, I mean, I think we need to enjoy them while we have them here with us, because we both know nothing lasts forever. We ain't two strapping young studs like we used to be, with flowing mane of hair. But we were talking earlier about concerts, and I have always been really into concerts. Really, that's always been something, concerts and shows. But there's some shows that I've gone to, but there's also some shows I wish I could have seen. And I think I was
Oh
probably
yeah.
born about 10 years too late. I should probably be around your age to have been able to see the Led Zeppelins or the Stones in the 70s, stuff like that.
Well, there were a lot of concert when I was young in the 70s, shown in this part of the country had a lot of concerts. And you get tickets for 5, $10, and you'd see some great shows. I mean, there were shows with Guess Who, Three Dog Night, and some other band. I mean, it was a great show. And my brother was really into concerts. I wasn't. I probably missed more great concerts that I could have gone to than I went to. If I was to pick out one of the two best concerts I've ever seen, one was John Mellencamp when he was just coming out, and he played the Northrop Auditorium on the University of Minnesota campus. It's a smaller venue. We were up in the balcony, and that fucker was just flying around the stage. Quite a departure from what you see now with Mellencamp. He didn't seem to have quite the attitude either, but John Mellencamp did something. What I liked about John Mellencamp is there was no um, he was just very real. And he'd play for a while, and he stopped and he said, "Listen, I'm not going to." Um, and this was in the early '80s. Uh, he said, "I'm not going to make any bullshit here. Here's what's going to happen." He ended the show. He says, "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go back. I'm going to smoke a couple cigarettes, and then I'm going to come back out here and I'm going to play some more, so you know what's going on." So he does that, and we're in Minnesota, early '80s, and he comes back out, and before he plays this next set, he says, "Dudes, I gotta let you hear something." Pulls out a boom box, puts it on a chair. He starts this mother. He goes, "This motherfucker is bad. He is going to be great," and he plays Prince,
Hmm.
our own Prince, and he's playing some songs from Prince, and so he was taken by this kid's talent, and then he shuts that down and he goes on to play the rest of his set. To me, that was a great concert because it was close up, it was intimate, and he was just being a real dude. I love that concert.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are under the estimation that Prince just came out when 1999 came out. That he came out in the late 70s. He had a few, but he was kind of the next big thing for a while. And then of course, when Purple Rain and all that stuff hit, it was a freaking just, explosion.
Well, when he first hit, I was living in Arizona at a radio station. I worked at a radio station. Somebody came up and go, "Hey, this dude's from Minnesota." And I looked at this young guy, black guy with the long hair. I go, "I never fucking heard of him. Minnesota, what the fuck?" And uh, then we started playing a couple of his songs. "I Want to Be Your Lover," and there was another one. I can't remember what it was. I like that one better. But these were nice, really poppy songs. I go, fuck, I'm a radio guy. These are good songs. It's surprising this kid's coming from Minnesota, but I never really thought much about it. And then when he went on, he had like Controversy and some other ones that were very well acclaimed. And then when I was back in Minnesota, I had a studio that happened to be kitty corner from First Avenue. And well, 1999 came first, and that was big, the song 1999. But then Purple Rain came out as I'm in this recording studio, as I own this recording studio, kitty corner from First Avenue. So they're filming the movie right outside my building. I watched much of the movie being filmed, and you're right, that was the explosion. That's when uh, like when Dove's crying, all that stuff. Um, that's when he went from kind of a cool pop star to iconic or legendary status. That's where he exploded. And after that, it was a free fall for huge stardom.
Yeah, I think one of the first songs that I remember him doing was I think it's a song that Shaka Khan did later, I Feel For You.
I feel for you.
Feel For You, and he also did the song Delirious, which was
Oh, great song.
a great song. But I mean, he wrote songs for other people. And I mean that and it just all kind of came together because he also wrote, Manic Monday because he wanted to meet Susanna Hoffs from the bank. I would say their name wrong. The
People,
Bengals. I mean, the
you
guy had
notice that
you could tell.
you notice how Prince did that, and he wasn't being sly about it at all. Susanna Hoffs was a hot girl, and she was talented. So
Mhm.
he says, "How do I meet a girl?" Well, some people might call him up, try to meet him in a bar.
Yeah.
Prince just writes her a hit song, and what's she gonna say? Yeah, I'll hang out with you. Sinead O'Connor, that song.
Yeah.
That
Nothing compares
that's
to you.
one of my favorite songs he's ever done, and I like his version better.
Oh
It's an
yeah.
incredible song. But you know what? My wife and I have this argument. Prince was influenced by a lot of people, and a lot of people you wouldn't expect. It's not just George Clinton, it's not just Bootsy Collins. He was influenced by Joni Mitchell,
Mhm.
and the premise for the song he did for Sinead O'Connor is the same premise that a Minnesota artist came out with several years before. And that artist was Michael Johnson. And the song was Bluer Than Blue. I'm bluer than blue, sadder than sad. I can watch TV all night and all that stuff. It's the same premise. And it wouldn't surprise me if Prince kind of took the concept from that. Totally different song, certainly, but the premise is the same.
Yeah, it's like Keith Richards says, there's like one big song, and then
Yeah.
we go there and we all kind of, and of course, one band that I never got to see because they broke up when I was like 8 is Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin is probably in my top, they're definitely in my top five with, Kiss and Metallica and the Rolling Stones. Led Zeppelin was not the critics' darling when they came out. They got the name Led Zeppelin because I think it was Pete, who was it, the drummer for the Who?
Pete
Uh,
Townsend?
Keith Moon said they'd go over like a Led Zeppelin. And I don't think people realize what the shit they went through because back in the 60s, the Hindenburg was still a kind of relatively, it had only happened, a few years earlier with it exploding.
Right.
And I mean, that was like a catastrophe. I mean, if you ever seen the video, I mean, it's just god awful. But I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's on Netflix. It's Becoming Led Zeppelin. It's a documentary.
Yeah.
And it's, that is one band, probably 1975. I was 3 that I wish I could have seen. And I've seen the Stones, I've seen Kiss, I've seen Aerosmith, I've seen AC/DC. But that is like the one concert next to probably Prince, because Prince played here in San Antonio, I think in the 90s. And my boss at the time went to it solo. And his wife told me, though, Antonio went to see the Prince by himself. I was like, why didn't you call me? I would have went. I love Prince. But I think Led Zeppelin and Prince are probably two concerts. I mean, I would have loved to see the Stones, circa the 72 tour, when they were, across America.
Right.
But, if I could go back in a time machine, and I think music is almost like a time machine because
It is.
there's an album that came out 50 years ago this year. It's called Kiss Alive. And it was produced by Eddie Kramer, who did, Zeppelin, a drummer. But Kiss, they didn't really their studio albums didn't really sell because you weren't really hearing what they were like live. And when they go live, of course, back then, they kind of mess with the, let's make the crowd a little bit, let's make the bass a little bit louder. So that's come out now. And what they were doing now is they released Kiss Alive. It pretty much Casablanca, they were a disco label. Donna
Right.
Summer and Cher and Kiss. Well, Kiss saved that label. The
Right.
uh, the manager for Kiss had to put the tour on the American Express card. Well, these albums sold because you kind of got a show of what it was. But what they have done now, it's funny. They'll release put all this stuff behind it, but what they do with the box set, they actually release the real tapes of how it's said live. And it's interesting to say, would that have sold as much if you got that? But I mean, they didn't make no bones about it. It's like, well, it's the concert experience. It's what, you should experience. But I can tell you, there's probably a lot of albums that had a little bit of magical touches to it, if you know what I mean.
Oh, no question. And I think you're right about Led Zeppelin and Prince. And I think the reason why both those were kind of a turning point. They were originators of a sound. I mean, I know a lot of people will say, I like Metallica, I like this heavy metal. And I was never a big heavy metal fan, but I love Led Zeppelin. And I will put Led Zeppelin up against any heavy metal band before or since, including Metallica. And I'm betting that Metallica would probably agree.
Oh yeah.
Led Zeppelin was an unusual occurrence. It was a turning point in the country. Um, I mean, I tell the story that when what was it, 72 or so, when Stairway to Heaven came out, we're hearing it all, the park dances and all this stuff. And I never really went out. I think the first 45 I bought at Woolworths was Kentucky Rain by Elvis Presley. I love Elvis Presley. Um, and then I went out and tried to buy the single for Stairway to Heaven because it was an awesome fucking song. Everybody loved that song. And then when I got there, I found out you can't buy it. There was no single of Stairway to Heaven. You had to buy the whole album. I'm 12. I don't have $7 to buy a whole fucking album. I had $1 to buy one song. So I was very disappointed by that. But they were the originators of something that went off on a different angle. And so was Prince. I will tell you the best Prince concert. I saw two. I saw a number of Prince concerts, but the two best ones I saw were from early on and one from later on. I had a friend who was an original member of the group The Time. And this is when Prince had the whole group. He had The Time, he had Apollonia 6, and he played at some place, I think it was the Met Sports Center, which is no longer there anymore. Prince played. It started out with Apollonia 6. Never a huge fan of Apollonia 6 music, but I like their look, you know?
Wonder why.
It's like it's like cocaine. I don't like cocaine. I just like the smell of it. But
No,
so you watch Apollonia 6, and then the Time goes out there, and they absolutely kick ass. Absolutely kick ass. And then Prince comes out. And this was before Prince kind of reformed himself. So he's there and he's doing his shit. He's awesome. And then a fucking bed comes down from the ceiling. He gets up on top of the bed. He's humping the bed. He's doing all this crazy shit. But that was a top shelf concert from beginning to end. And I had good seats because my friend was in the Time. And I have to tell you, on that particular night, and I think Prince kind of wanted this, but he also took note of it. As far as performances, the Time blew Prince off the fucking stage.
I
The
bet.
Time just had the energy and it was fun and the cool songs, all of which that Prince wrote. Um, but that was a great show. That was a fucking incredible show. The other one I saw that was totally different was later on. My brother got us tickets to Prince on his musicology tour. You know, now he's more reformed. He's all dressed up. This thing's in the round. We're sitting in like the second row. Fucking awesome concert. That's the one thing about Led Zeppelin and Prince. When you see them, you're not disappointed like a lot of artists after hearing their records. They sound as good or better in person than they do on their records.
I think Led Zeppelin pretty much, inspired bands like the Stones because the Stones, if you notice in the 70s, got a little bit more hard rock edge to them. I mean,
Yeah.
when they were in the 60s, they were kind of more the Beatles like, with that, I want to, let's spend the night together. But like in the 70s, they came out with Can You Hear Me Knocking? I mean, if that's not a Jimmy Page inspired riff, I mean, I know he's Keith Richards, but Keith Richards hears that stuff. And I read some books on Led Zeppelin. They actually used, I guess, the Stones and Mick Jagger had a recording studio, a portable recording studio. They used that. So did Black Sabbath, which Black
Yeah.
Sabbath you listen to a lot of their stuff, it sounds very Led Zeppelinish. It's, there's so many chords that you can play. But even the Faces with Rod Stewart and Ron Wood, they were kind of getting into that. I guess it was called acid rock at the time, but
Right.
all came from like the Led Zeppelin Spear and those guys playing that stuff. And I think with Led Zeppelin, when they did that movie, The Song Remains the Same, I think it started inspiring, rock bands to start doing movies too. I mean, you had the wonderful Kiss Me Savannah in the Park, which was they call the biggest joke of all time. But it goes to the 80s, what Prince did when he did Purple Rain. That's when you kind of started seeing the whole Miami Vice
Yeah.
stuff, music. You started seeing, I mean, Huey Lewis in the News, another one I wish I could have seen. I mean, a lot of that stuff, but like the early days of MTV and like music videos and like commercials, they were rock orientated. That comes from the Huey Lewis's, that comes from the Princes. So that stuff they did, and it pretty much, built that 80s sound to where like even like the MTV, the guitar, dun, 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 that's I mean, what is that? That's rock and roll. And that's
Yeah.
something that before hip hop took over, probably closer to the 90s, you know, a lot of that stuff is what, Prince and artists like him started. I mean, you were pretty much you were seeing concerts on TV. You couldn't be
Yeah.
there in, Minnesota, I mean, hell, one of the first concerts I really saw Kiss, they played Cobo Hall. It was an MTV concert.
Right.
I couldn't see them here, but I was like 12 and I watched it and I got to see that. I mean, that all that's MTV and all that comes from just, when MTV started, MTV's and they would have concerts all the time on MTV.
You're right about that, especially with Prince. I'm thinking about the first songs he put out for you off his album Soft and Wet. He did I Want to Be Your Lover. And then he did Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad. And they're great little poppy songs. And then you move ahead 5 years and you got Darling Fucking Nikki. That's flat out rock. And a lot of what's on that Purple Rain song, Let's Go Crazy. I mean, that's got the epitome of rock with the guitar solos and all that shit. They did transition, and you're right, that kind of created the sound of the 80s. It took pop and made it a little edgier, a little rockier.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Did
you
you
had
know did you know the Rolling Stones, one of their first hits was written by Lennon and McCartney?
yes.
I want to be your man or something like that. That when you think about all the arguing and how they're rivals and stuff like that, they were actually kind of friends and they
Oh yeah.
were rivals in a certain sense. But even the Beatles, like you say with the Rolling Stones, the Beatles were always kind of a poppy, maybe going off into rock things now and then, like Come Together or something like that. But but the Rolling Stones really did take that branch and they went more rock, even though
Oh
they
yeah.
were a little poppy at first. Like "Get Off of My Cloud," that was kind of poppy. It wasn't later till you hear Steelers Wheels and all this other shit. Um, um, uh, yeah, I'd never thought about that before, but things did get edgier as we got into the '80s.
And you have a thing that started kind of in the 70s too, to where you hear that song Stay With Me by the Faces.
Yeah,
And you hear Can You Hear Me Knocking by the Stones. I mean, those are sister songs. I mean,
yeah,
what's the one thing in common? Ron Wood.
right.
Ron Wood, I don't know if Ron Wood was really on Can You Hear Me Knocking? I think it was more Mick Jones, I think before. But that whole rock and roll thing got into the 80s, got you talk about the Beatles being a pop band. They actually are credited for the first, heavy metal song, and it's called Helter Skelter. That
Right.
was what's credited for starting that. And you listen to like something like Revolution. I mean, as heavy as that guitar is coming out in the 60s and 70s, I mean that's
Yeah,
some heavy shit. So it's all just kind of that sound that just, created, and I tell you what, you were talking about Metallica. Yeah, Metallica is probably the Led Zeppelin of my generation. They're probably the greatest
right,
band X.
right.
I will say that, and I will die on the hill for that because, but they're a band like Zeppelin that didn't stay complacent. I mean, you have a band like AC/DC. I mean, you could almost say they put the same album out for, with different arrangements. But that works for them. AC/DC is great. They're one of the greatest rock and roll bands,
They
and they're
are.
They're a band that you may not necessarily like. You don't necessarily like heavy metal, but you like AC/DC.
Well, exactly. I'm not a big heavy metal guy, but there's something about an AC/DC song that reminds me of when I was in my teenage years, and you can't help but get inspired by it or just rocking by it. Back in Black, Highway to Hell. It's just, when I'm a teenage kid, there's a lot of songs like that kind of kick it up in me. Like there was two songs in the 70s that didn't come from um, huge bands that went on and did anything big. But one is Radar Love by Golden Earring. I'm driving all night, man, sweat on the wheel. It's just a great driving song. It's pumping, it's pumping. And the other one is Black Betty by Ram Jam, which was a remake of an old Leadbelly song that would sound totally different. But it had that driving force. And if you're a young man with more testosterone than brains, you love that shit.
You know what? Golden Earring, they got another song called Twilight Zone, and that is
Yeah.
another. I don't know if you ever heard that one, but that they're always giving, well, they're a one hit wonder. It's like fuck, they're not a one hit wonder. They have that other one too, but they're like nothing old is everything old is new again. Because there was a band in the 80s and 90s, and they were called White Lion. They were a glam band. And around 87, 88, they did a cover of Radar Love, which I will say is probably not as, nothing's beats the original, but man, that was a hell of a cover. And you
I
just,
haven't
and
heard it.
yeah, yeah, they were an 80s, they had a song called When the Children Cry. That was a big hit. They were a glam band, but Radar Love is pretty good. It was all over MTV, the guys were riding bicycles, and they were, motorcycles, and they were, playing. I mean, it's a rocking version. And yeah, so I mean, nothing like said, and you listen to Led Zeppelin and you hear some of their stuff, and they are notorious for being accused of plagiarism.
Right.
There's a band called Spirit, which I think recently was suing them. I mean, though the song's been out longer than I've been alive, like they
Right.
ripped off Stairway to Heaven, ripped it off or something. But I mean, you also have this band called the Verve. I think the Verve Pipe. I guess they had
Yeah.
Bittersweet Symphony,
Yeah.
and the Stones, sued them over that. Which is funny that the Stones sue anybody because they could be accused of ripping people off too. I mean, it's like that. It's like that big song that everybody rips off. But when you see the Metallica, I mean, and talking about the AC/DC and there's a band from my home state which was definitely different. That you had to think that probably got inspired by Prince and maybe Huey Lewis, and that's ZZ Top. Because
Oh, yeah.
there you talk about a band that changed its sound and changed definitely its image. Well, not his image maybe, but when they did stuff like Sharp Dressed Man, I mean, it made this people that that love Tush and beer drinkers and Hellraisers blush. It's like they sold out, but no, they were just with the times. They were, and that's another concert I saw ZZ Top. I've seen them. I saw ZZ Top two times, and both times have been great. And they're just what they say. They're just a little band from Texas.
Well, and you know what? They're a little band from Texas, but what's the lead guy's name?
Billy Gibbons.
Billy Gibbons. Billy Gibbons started out in like a typical 60s pop band, and he is a hell of a guitarist. He's such a good guitarist that it was said that Jimi Hendrix
Mhm.
said that he was the best guitarist in the country.
Yeah, it was a
And
Tonight Show interview.
and ZZ Top, um, they're kind of like AC/DC. They're not doing these complicated songs, but it's the whole vibe of the song. When you see Sharp Dressed Man or Tres Hombres, I mean that's a classic fucking song. Coming around town, the Texas town. I remember being in my teens going, I don't know what the fuck he's saying, but that's a badass song.
Yeah, they have a song it's talking about drinking and driving. It's like when you've been driving and that red turkey's got a bite on you. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm butchering the lyrics, but I mean, that's what rock and roll is about, man. I mean, it's you know, a lot of these bands would be in jail right now if they sang what they sang back then. We all saw how Chuck Berry turned out. Kiss had Christine 16. The Stones talking about brown sugar. They don't even play that anymore. I mean, it's
That
pretty.
fucking song, I never understood the words to it till recently. Holy fuck. Talking about the slave trade and whipping women. Wow. How did that would have never made it today. And that was a great song.
Well, I mean, the lyrics are there. I mean, he says it right then. And like, sold in the market in New Orleans. He says it right there.
But you
I
don't
mean,
listen when you're a kid, you don't listen to the lyrics. It's just the whole sound. And but again, when we were back in the 60s or 70s, I was talking to somebody about this when it comes to racism or sexism or
that's what.
misogyny. All that was just accepted. Of course, women are second class citizens. Of course, Mexican people are lazy. That was the accepted opinion back then. And that's why the 60s and 70s, while they had great attributes, horribly fucked up culturally.
Yeah, and you have people nowadays that they try to judge, like they do this thing that people weren't alive, and they go back and they judge this stuff. It's like, yeah, it was horrible, but I mean, there's a reason why you don't do it. And of course, there's a segment of this country that, if you think racism is wrong, you're called woke. So, well, they can call us woke, but they're fucking triggered, over everything. So, I mean, it, it I mean, you look at everything that you talk about that. I mean, you talk about, what was it, the Frito Bandito, the
Yeah.
Fritos,
I
and
am the Frito Bandito.
well,
I love Fritos corn
look
chips.
at
I
Speedy
love them. I
Gonzales.
do.
Look at Speedy cartoons. They had all the Mexicans were sleeping. I mean, you had all that stuff, and I'd like to think that we've gotten to the point to where, yeah, that should maybe bug you, but it was a different time. You can't come back and judge people for the way it was back then, living now. It's not, it doesn't make it right, but it's not necessarily gonna make things any better anyway. I mean,
When I
you've got to progress, is what you got to
when I
do.
was a little when I was a little boy and I got up in the morning, I would watch the Little Rascals. Okay, the Little Rascals. They were cute, they were funny, and there was Buckwheat, and there was Spanky, and there was all those guys. I remember a scene. It stuck in my mind forever because I didn't get it at first, and then when I got it, I thought, "Fuck you." It was very racist. So Spanky's in his kitchen, and there's eggs cooking. Okay, so Buckwheat walks in, and in typical stereotypical black characterization back then. This is the 40s when this is going on. Buckwheat walks in, he goes, he smells, he goes, man, those eggs are talking to me. So he goes over and he starts messing with the eggs and he gets sweaty because he's over the hot stove. So, specifically done to make this point, Buckwheat is sweating and making the eggs. He wipes his brow and then he does that. And then it immediately shows the wall with black spots on it. I'm going, wow, mom, that's not even fucking real. She goes, no, that's. And then I just thought it was goofy or a mistake or something at first because I didn't know any better. And then as I got older, I go, that's a special kind of fucked up.
Well, hell, you even watched the "It's a Wonderful Life" when the
Yeah.
and Potter's saying stuff, and he's calling the Italians moving into him, calling a bunch of garlic eaters. I mean, it's just so much stuff that you take for granted growing up that you don't think anything about. It's like me. I saw Grease as a little kid. I watched that motherfucker in high school. I'm like, holy shit. I mean, that is a
Yeah.
dirty fucking movie. I mean, I don't know,
I mean,
man.
Grease Lightning was called a pussy wagon, for fuck's sake.
Pixel Cream. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not talking about, your coffee and stuff like that, but that's what rock and roll, I think that's why rock and roll has always been kind of, I mean, I've told my story before how I was raised in a Christian evangelical, and I was told not to watch all these movies and I watch all these, rock videos and stuff. And when I got to see that stuff, and what their biggest problem is that they showcase the artists. They had Gene Simmons on there, they had Steven Tyler on there, they had Mick Jagger on there, and it had the direct opposite on me. Is like, man, these motherfuckers are cool. They're sitting there and they're arguing, with these Southern Baptist preachers that are, racist against Gene Simmons because he's Jewish. And it's like, don't threaten me with a good time. I mean, there's a song, one of my favorite Stone songs, and they get a lot of shit for, sympathy for the devil, but there's another song they have, it's called Dancing with Mr. D.
Yeah.
And that fucking song is all about Satan and Lucifer. I mean, you think about, sympathy for the devil. I mean, that tells a story about how, I mean, it pretty much takes from the Bible how, Lucifer was he was the angel of light. And
Right.
now, I mean, it's like, it almost makes it sound with religion is that God is helpless and that the devil is cooler. And I think they've really missed a lot of that stuff on there trying to portray them that way.
Well, don't you think back in the 70s and the 60s and all this stuff, all this talk about, well, they're Satanistic and they're this and they're that. It was just all a ploy to sell records.
Right.
Um, these people weren't really Satanistic. They knew if they did this, that would get attention or get banned someplace, which would translate into more record sales. It was a marketing ploy back then, and everybody tried to make it out, well, they're trying to destroy our youth. Nah, they're just trying to get the youth to buy fucking albums.
Well, don't you think that they're kind of doing that now still? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
you look at the New York thing going on. Oh my God, socialist, communist. I mean, it's just and it's sadly it's the right side of things because I grew up on that right side of things.
Well, and who's the people always doing this? Whether it
Huh.
be, we went through the music thing in the 80s where you had to label the shit and they were yelling at Prince because he said nasty things and all this stuff. It's always the evangelicals, the far right religious fucks. It's always them stirring the shit up. Um, and you talk about the Beatles, everybody thinks they're clean. They're not like the Rolling Stones. But they had a song too that started out, "She was just 17. You know what I mean?" I mean, that
Sorry.
was just that was accepted back then. Nobody thought twice about it when they put it out. They go, "That's a great song." Yeah, 17. I know what you mean. It's just culture has changed. It's weird. For the longest time, this country had always gotten more permissive of racy stuff. And then with the start of Trump and the radical right, we start going backwards. Now, I'm not saying that's bad necessarily, but it's weird. In our history, we've gone on to become more permissive of things, and then all of a sudden, like a brick wall, now we got to go back to fucking pilgrim times and the Puritans.
Well, that's what makes me laugh is that, the people that don't want you to touch their Bible or their guns wants to tell you what you can fucking do in the bedroom.
Right.
And and now, there's a thing coming up now where how this lady is still has a case about the, same-sex marriage thing that we're fucking still debating that in 2025. I mean, what the fuck, people? I mean, and a lot of the people that are for that now, I knew before that weren't. They were the ones that were listening to the Beastie Boys, fight for your right to party. A lot of these baby boomers that grew up, with Bob Dylan and, the Grateful Dead, hey man, don't fuck with my buzz. I mean, what the fuck have they become? I mean, it's like they've become even worse than their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people have to understand if you're younger, if you were gay in the 60s or the 50s or the 40s, that shit was illegal. They'd come into the bars and arrest people for dancing with same sex partners. It's that fucked up. I'm sure a lot of young people don't understand. Well, they get, the gay people get too much benefit and maybe we should pull that back. No, bitches, they were putting people in jail for just being attracted to somebody of their own sex. That too is a special kind of fucked up.
Almost like you say, you mentioned it before, that song by Rod Stewart, Killing a Georgie.
Yeah.
You have people that, would, disown their kids because, and I'm sorry, but, it's natural. It's a fucking natural thing. You know what I mean? And, people, when they, and I don't think rock and roll makes you that way, but the way they, I think rock and roll, it started out and it was racist because those artists were black. And a lot of the white kids were listening to that artist, the black artist. You had Elvis doing that. You had, the Beatles doing that. And that's where it comes from. And then it somehow went to Satan, and I think that's why Robert Johnson, the guy that, supposedly sold his soul at the crossroads, what's he? He's black. He's a black artist that played
Well,
everybody.
yeah.
He had to, of course, he couldn't be talented on his own. He has to be inspired by the fucking devil.
You know what pisses me off? Back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of black artists, including Little Richard, got absolutely ripped off from their music. Um, Little Richard said something once. Um, he said, "Do you realize Pat Boone and Elvis Presley sold more records singing Tutti Frutti than I did, and I wrote the fucking song." And that's
Yep.
absolutely true. Now, I think there's a bit of a difference between Elvis Presley and Pat Boone. First of all, Elvis Presley tried to do it more true to the way Little Richard did. And a lot of people say, well, he co opted black music. No, he was inspired by black music. I think Elvis helped to open the door for more black music, make it more acceptable. So I think he did a positive thing. Pat Boone, to this day, is a radical right, religious, racist motherfucker. I've seen him do stuff on TikTok. This fucker took a rockin' song and turned it into a cute little pop song that would sell in the 50s. And as much as he talks shit about people of color, he's more than happy to take a black man's song and make $1 billion off of it. Fuck Pat Boone. I know there's people out there that like Pat Boone, but I've seen him over the years. To me, he's akin to Anita Bryant, who went through her shit with gay people. Fuck Pat Boone.
Yeah, the thing about Pat Boone is he did something in like the late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s called, he did a metal album, but it was all like, Lawrence Welk soft swing shit. And some people, oh, that's pretty cool, huh? It's like, no, he's fucking making fun of this shit because I
Yeah,
grew up watching him in movies like The Cross and the Switchblade, those religious movies. But it's
yeah,
that whole, it's kind of like what Christian nationalists do. They try to, you have Metallica, but Christian nationalists, they have Petra. So they would have these artists that ripped off, it's like current, pop singers or whatever.
right.
Amy Grant, even she was too risque for me growing up. But they always try to,
Amy Grant?
yeah, I was raised that she was too, yeah, her and Sandy Petty.
Oh,
And
fuck's sake.
but what they would do is that they would, try to, like, a Petra would, was like a hard rock band. They would try to rival Metallica. Like they would like kind of create their own, like, you know, yeah, you have Bryan Adams, but there would be a contemporary thing. It's like, oh, this is our Bryan Adams, or this is our Metallica, this is our, and I think
Yeah.
one of the worst is Stryper. People are like, you don't like Stryper? They're a glam band. No, because I don't, I get preached to enough at school. I don't want to hear it in my fucking music, man. I mean, it's just it's like you're only alive for, and my thing is you're only alive for so long, and none of us really know what's going to happen after you die. So if I sit here and deny myself the few pleasures I have and I die and there's nothing else, I've wasted it. And in the same thing,
Yeah.
they might say, well, you didn't lose anything. Yeah, I lost a whole bunch of fucking fun because and that's why it's just really hard for me, just for people that live in the past, like, the Amish people, or, stuff that, there's a thing to where you got to progress. And, a lot of people would laugh at me because, like, I don't really listen to new music. Well, you still live in the past with the music, but the music's a time machine. It takes me there. I couldn't go see Led Zeppelin, but I can listen to the live at BBC. I can be there. I can listen to the Kiss Alive. I can watch Purple Rain. It takes you back there. Could I have seen, Led Zeppelin in 75 have been great, but I got to see the Rolling Stones in 1984 or
Right.
1994. That was, to me, still the best concert because I've seen other bands, but when you see the Stones, And I was sitting here and hearing Mick Jagger talk to Keith Richards talking about this is in '94. It's like, don't you remember when we first started here? We did a teen fair back in '64 here. I mean, that's the kind of shit I like to hear. I like to like you say, look at a picture, listen to an album, and it transfers me back there. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
what it does for me.
You know, there was a sometimes concerts, things happen, and it kind of changes history a little bit. I didn't go to this concert, but my wife went to the concert well before I ever knew her. And we always had these concerts at Met Stadium where the Twins played, and there would be like three bands showing up, and it would just be a blockbuster for the time. And there was a concert planned for Met Sports or Met Center or Met Stadium, and it was going to be the Beach Boys. I think it was Pablo Cruz and Chicago. It's a good concert for the late 70s. And but what happened was the lead singer and head guy with Chicago killed himself inadvertently. I don't think he did it on purpose. Terry Kath, great guitar player, great singer, the essence of Chicago, and he killed himself. So they had to cancel. So they had to replace Chicago with somebody. And they picked out somebody that obviously wasn't as popular, but was available at the time and was had a recent hit. Uh, and that was Boss Skaggs.
Hmm.
Now, Boss Skaggs is one of my favorites of all time. I think the song Low Down is one of the iconic songs of the 70s. There's a lot of iconic songs that I think, but when you hear Low Down, you think 70s. It's kind of a bluesy rock type of thing. And he, of course, had other songs like Lido Shuffle, but he showed up at that concert. My wife had never heard of Boss Skaggs before that. And from that point, she and her friends saw Boss Skaggs at that concert, and they became huge fans of his just by happenstance that he had to fill in for some tragic accident with Chicago. I mean, I think I think concerts do have important effects on people's lives. Obviously, it has you.
Oh yeah, yeah, my all-time favorite band's Kiss. I've seen them 14 times. I saw them up from the 80s, 90s up till, when they were, retired a couple years ago. I think, I've seen Metallica numerous times. I've seen the Stones twice. And I'm to the point now in my life where I don't really, there's not really a lot of bands that I still want to see.
Yeah.
I've seen Rod Stewart a number of times. He's, like I said, he's my all-time favorite singer. He just announced he's going to extend his going away tour. Hey, he's 80 and he can still fucking rock, man. I saw him a couple years ago. He's still great. But AC/DC actually announced another. They did a one part of a North American tour, and they just announced another one. They're actually playing San Antonio. I saw AC/DC. Let's just say how long it's been. The last time I saw AC/DC was the last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl. It was in
Oh wow.
1996. It was the night before the Cowboys beat the Steelers in that last Super Bowl.
Wow.
And I think they haven't really played here since then, but that's a band. They're up there. I'm gonna go see. Another band, I'm to the point now where I don't really go to concerts anymore. I pick who I see. Obviously, if the Stones do another tour, I'll go see it. Paul McCartney was just here in San Antonio 2 weeks ago. I've seen Paul McCartney, one time. He played Austin back in 2013. He was doing a bunch of places he'd never been to before. Great show, but like I said, I'm more of a Stones fan, and I want to, I had
Yeah.
tickets to see the Stones with Charlie Watts right before COVID. Then COVID came, canceled the tour, and then Charlie Watts is gone. But I'll still go see the Stones because I think they're going to do another tour. But it's down to like Iron Maiden, which I'm going to go see next year, Metallica, if they ever tour here again, AC/DC, because Kiss and Aerosmith are both gone. So I'm to the point now where I don't really go like I used to. Like I thought about going to Paul McCartney, but I was like, man, I've seen him already. And like I said, I'm more of a Stones fan. I'd rather say it for them. But yeah, there was a time in my life, man, when I mean, and my first concert was Whitesnake. I got to meet them. That was great. The second one was Kiss, and I've just, seen so many. And I didn't start till 1990. I was already like around 18, but I put a lot of years and a lot of time in that. And like I said, I think one of the highlights for me was 1992. Kiss did a club tour before they did their thing. I got to see them in a club on my 20th birthday in 1992. So it was on the worst part of Dallas you could get to. It was right after the LA riots, so it was a seedy part of town, but I got to see Kiss in the club. And I think one of my biggest misses was in 1991 is when ZZ Top was on tour with the Black Crowes. And I had gotten tickets and I love the Black Crowes. Saw them last year. But they were supposed to open, and then Chris Robinson gets thrown off the tour because he talks about corporate sponsorship. Of course, now Black Crowes have all the corporate sponsorship because they're the headliner. And so
Right,
I got
right.
to miss that. So that's like one big, and I think missing Led Zeppelin and missing Prince are like, my big misses that if I could go back in a time machine, that's where I'd go.
Well, like I said, I'm not a huge concert person. My wife is a big concert person. She's up and dancing. I'm sitting there with my arms crossed just listening because I'm not much of a dancer. But the one thing that, the one bandwagon that my wife and I jumped on recently, because we're retired, we had the flexibility to do this and we had a little money. Um, we went and saw, both my wife and I, one of our all time favorites at the XL Center in St. Paul, and that was Bob Seger. Now, Bob Seger comes out. He looks like the old guy down the block mowing his lawn. That's what he looks like. But he still sounds like Bob Seger. And we love that concert so much. And we're in Minneapolis. So after the concert, we're talking about the concert. And then I look at where his tour goes next. And I said, he's just going to Sioux Falls, which is about a 3 hour drive from us. The fuck? Let's go to that. So we drive to Sioux Falls, watch the concert. It's awesome again. And then we get back and I'm looking at it again. I go, Cindy, he's playing an outdoor venue in his hometown of Detroit. A beautiful venue. So we said, fuck it. Let's get in the car, drive to Detroit and go do that. So we saw 3 consecutive concerts by Bob Seger. Gotta tell you, not a lot of difference between them. Maybe a little bit here and there, but we jumped on board that bandwagon. And by the time we got done and we're driving back from Detroit, we were pretty tired out, had enough of Bob Seger. But that was a fun experience because when you did that, you found out that there were other people kind of following him around the country that were just huge fans. And I am a huge, I mean, Bob Seger, he started out in the 60s. Ramblin' Man was like 69 or 68 or something. This guy's been around a long time, and he isn't necessarily considered one of the big iconic rock stars, but he was a force during all of rock and roll from the late 60s into the fucking 80s. I mean, he was doing Fire Lake and commercials like a rock and stuff. He just never fucking stopped. And somebody said he's coming back out. I go, no way. I saw him on a said his swan song tour, and then I heard he was sick and in a wheelchair. And they're saying, no, he's coming back out. I go, well, then I guess I'll have to see him in a fucking wheelchair.
That's what Ann Wilson from Heart is now. She can still sing, but she's in a wheelchair now. And you talk about a band that, probably had to pay their dues back in the 70s, with all the men thing around, because there was actually a rumor about her and Nancy, her sister, being lesbians. I mean, that's how misogynistic it was.
Yeah.
And but talking about Bob Seger, to me, I never got the Springsteen thing.
I'm not a
I got,
huge Springsteen fan, but I like him.
yeah, I do too, but I never got the hype for him.
No,
I never thought he was all that great. I think the one who deserved that hype is Bob Seger because
absolutely.
he had in the 60s, he had in the 70s, he had in the 80s. He had a song in the 80s that I remember. My mom listened to Bob Seger back in the 70s. I mean, she listened to the Stones and Rod Stewart, and that's pretty much why, Foreigner, bands I like to this day. But he had a song that was on Beverly Hills Cop 2 soundtrack called Shakedown.
Yeah.
I thought is one of the best 80s songs. It's kind of like the Huey Lewis and the News, I Want a New Drug. That is so typical of the 80s, those two songs. And he came out in the 90s with Like a Rock. I mean, that was no newer song. It had Chevy use that for so many years. But yeah,
Oh yeah,
I think Bob Seger deserves all the love that Springsteen gets. I get the Springsteen thing. Maybe it's because it's more of a, East Coast thing, with that. Um, I I'm more of a Bon Jovi fan, and he worships Bruce Springsteen. So, and I actually want to see that movie. I was never a big Bob Dylan fan. I love that movie, uh, the Bob Dylan movie, and I want to see the Springsteen
good
movie.
movie.
Yeah, the Springsteen movie looks pretty good because it's got that guy that he's on. I think he's on a couple. He played one of the Von Erichs, and he was in Shameless. He's a good actor. I forget his
A-
name,
And on the Bear, Jeremy Allen. Yeah,
but
he is very good.
I like to see that movie. It looks pretty good. I like to learn more about it because, like I said, I really wasn't a Dylan fan. Maybe I'll learn some stuff about Springsteen, but I do. I mean, I do like Glory Days. I mean, I like that 80s stuff. And I
Yeah,
always loved about Springsteen is that you had these wrestlers and you had Reagan. You had them using Born in the USA, and it's like, yeah, that's another thing about not reading the room. It's like Born in the USA is about how America fucked over its veterans. And it's not really, I don't think it's an anti-American song. It's just about how shit is. And
yeah,
he was out there playing that Stay Born in the USA. That's all they hear. I guess with me, I've always been more of a lyrics guy. Because
me too.
I've always been a lyrics guy because I remember Motley Crue gets a lot of shit for their, girls, girls, girls and shit like that. But Nikki Sixx, who is, I'm not going to be a Mount Rushmore of songwriters or nothing, but as a teenager, he would write those songs and I would identify with them. Yeah, you're the kind of the freak that wasn't popular. You would do all this stuff. I like that shit because there was a song in the late 80s. There was a song in the mid 80s by a General Hospital star named Jack Wagner, and it was called All I Need. It was a big hit. Great song. Well, Motley had a song called You're All I Need. Well, evidently, Nikki Sixx, Jack Wagner was hooking up with a ex-girlfriend of his, and so he wrote this song. And the first part of the song goes, "The blade of my knife faced away from your heart. These last few days, it turned and sliced you apart." Now, this is a song that was all over commercial radio by Motley Crue because it had the chorus, "You're all I need. So you wouldn't be mine, so I put you to sleep." And I remember just being horrified that my mom and people weren't listening. It's like, my God, this song about killing your girlfriend. I mean, it's like the stuff that musicians have gotten away with. It's
Yeah,
like, One by Metallica, big hit. It's about a guy stuck in his own body. There, about, wanting to kill himself because he's stuck in his own body. I mean, I guess words, yeah, it's nice to hear words and, melody and stuff like that, but lyrics have always just been my thing too, I guess.
when you talk about Bob Seger or Bruce Springsteen, I always seem to like. Again, when we talk about Bob Seger, another iconic song from the '70s, as far as I'm concerned, is "Night Moves," a great song. But I liked a lot of his B-side type stuff. Like "Shame on the Moon," um, "Come to Papa," "Horizontal Bop." A lot of people love "Turn the Page."
Oh,
Just
great song.
the ones that weren't the huge hits. And with Bruce Springsteen, of all the songs he sings, my favorite song of his is probably Rosalita because of the vibe of the whole song. Um, and that's the thing. If you've got somebody you like to hear their hits, you got to dig deeper into the albums. Like I loved Elton John in the early '70s. I had the album. I didn't have many albums, but I had "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Just the Piano Player," and it had Daniel and Crocodile Rock on it. But it had a lot of great B-side hits like Elderberry Wine and stuff. That's if you have people that you liked back in the day. I've seen some people on TikTok saying, "I'm going to take one artist, I'm going to listen end to end every album they've ever done." And that would be interesting, especially if it's something you like, because you probably missed songs that you would absolutely love, but they weren't being played on the radio.
I do that. I do that every once in a while when I find an artist that, I'll go back and, an artist that I like, I'll go back and listen to the albums. But talk about Turn the Page. Have you ever heard the Metallica version that
No,
did?
I haven't.
That is one of the best. one of the best. And look at the video too. You'll speaking of 70s, you'll notice a little 70s star called Ginger Lynn
Yeah,
stars in the video. She's a
porn
stripper.
star.
She's a porn star, but she's starring as a stripper in that video. The Metallica's on the road and she's dancing. Of course, this is the late 90s and stuff like that. But turn the page. That is, I mean, Metallica says that too. I mean, this is about a song being on the road. You
Yeah,
smoke your day's last cigarette, that's still ringing in your head. I mean, that's real America. That's I think that's why, like, and I know that a lot of people like new country, and it's a lot of it's bro country, and I don't like it. I mean, there was an artist, and he's no longer with us, and he gets a lot of crap for being, MAGA, but I don't really know if he was because I think he actually played for Joe Biden too, and that's Toby Keith.
yeah,
Toby Keith, he had those tendencies to be that way, to be that way, but I don't really think he was all the way to it. He just, you have a lot of artists that, like, the Jason Aldeans obviously are, they're doing stuff, but you have a lot of artists that are country, but they're not necessarily like that. And I think with Bob Seger, I think with, I think that's the real authentic person. And I just think that, he just comes off more authentic than a lot of this, I think him and like Toby Keith would come off a lot more authentic than a lot of this bro country that, that I love the old Hank Williams, the Hank Williams Jr., the George Straits. But I mean, when you get to new country, it's a lot of it's like the hair bands. A lot of it's
yeah.
like, a lot of the people that I knew growing up like hair bands, like country. I haven't done that. I mean, I like 90s country, a little bit of early 2000s, but a lot of that stuff, I mean, a lot of it's pop and a lot of it's crap to me.
Yeah.
And, Taylor Swift, I'm not a big fan of her music because it's a little bit below me, but I'm a big fan of the person. But I think that, when you talk about Elton John, and they were singer-songwriters. Today it's so mass produced to where these artists don't write their own music. And George Strait's one of them. George Strait doesn't write his own
Yeah.
music. He can sing a song probably like nobody else now. But Crocodile Rock. Crocodile Rock, and I think my favorite Elton John song is Honky Cat. That is one
Hockey
of
Cat's a good song.
love. I've always because I remember when I really got into Elton John, like in the probably in the mid 90s and stuff like that, when he went on tour with Billy Joel, and I saw that concert there. I mean, I like Billy Joel. He's okay, but I freaking love Elton John. Elton John,
I do
just
too.
Daniel. I did a thing in college speech class. We had to talk about a song, and it was "Candle in the Wind" because I used to be a big Marilyn Monroe fan, and just talking about that. But I mean, it's just like today's music seems to be just it's got a jingle and it's got a hit. The story seems to be gone nowadays. I mean, you don't have that,
The
killing it.
soul's been sucked out of it. I mean, what's a better song? What's a better song than Leave On or Tiny Dancer?
Oh yeah,
You can't name a better song than those songs. They're great songs. They're
yeah.
more slow, but Leave On has just got a great story, and it's very. The interesting thing about Elton John too is Elton John's the big star. He wrote all the music, but Bernie Taupin wrote all the
Eric.
lyrics. Two different people wrote these songs, and that's what I find intriguing. It's one thing for Prince to write "Darling Nikki" or "Let's Go Crazy," but um, what happened was Bernie Taupin would write these lyrics, and then Elton John would interpret it musically. That's crazy that these guys could be so connected that they could create these iconic, huge songs from two separate minds. That's weird.
Yeah, and I think another thing that kind of attributes the greatness of AC/DC, Hell's when Highway to Hell came out, they had a different singer, Bon Scott, and of course he
Right.
did a little drinking and driving, and a little bit of kind of started choking his own vomit and died. Well, they were already recording Back in Black. Angus and uh, Angus and Malcolm, the brothers, had it written pretty much, the music. And so what Brian Johnson did, Brian Johnson, he's the current singer of AC/DC. Well, he had a little bit of, he was in other bands and stuff like that. And if you've never read Brian, if there's a rock and roll book you want to read, bring Brian Johnson, just one of the coolest like rock stars there are. He wrote the lyrics for that. So he had to come up with Hell's Bells, Giving the Dog a Bone, Back in Black, and probably the biggest hit they've ever had, You Shook Me All Night Long.
Right.
I mean, to come up with that, you talk about Bernie Taupin doing that, trying to give an Elton John the music. Well, that's kind of flipped that you have all the music written and now you got to come up with the lyrics. I don't know which would be harder.
Yeah, it's got to be difficult as hell. You know, the thing about Bernie Taupin, British guy, right? But he was enthralled with the Old West. I
Mhm.
think he even lives down in Texas currently. He did for a time, or he lives in some other Western state. But when you think about Brown Dirt Cowboy, uh, and there's a bunch of other songs that are cowboy oriented. I mean, the song Tiny Dancer was about his girlfriend and his wife because she was kind of a ballerina and she's got the pirate smile and all that stuff. So it's intriguing when you listen to songs that actually meant something and came from something. I was sitting watching Bob Seger at the concert I told you about, and I'm thinking to myself, here's Bob Seger 40 years after the fact. He can play his music, shit's still rocking,
Yep.
still sounds good. My kids like the song. Are there any artists today that 40 years from now will be doing concerts and still pulling people's interest? Will Justin Bieber 40 years from now be able to do his old songs and will anybody care? I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, Prince is as talented as anybody could have ever been. But there's a lot of people right now don't know who the fuck Prince is, but they know who the Rolling Stones are. They know who the Beatles are. It's weird. There's been kind of a uh, what would I call it? I just think the quality of the music, and it's easy for me to say because I'm an old guy and these kids and their rock music and stuff. But if I take a song that's out there, a hit today that seems formulaic and just a shot to get a hit, and I take some meaningful song from the 70s or even the 80s, there's no comparison to me. I can't get into it like I did back in the day. Maybe it's because I'm old, or maybe it's because the songs are shittier.
Yeah, I also think why you still know who the Stones are, you still know who Elton John is because a lot of those bands are still touring, and there's a hunger for that. I mean, hell,
Yeah,
I didn't think that, I thought the Fleetwood Mac was over when Christy McVie died. It should have been. Hell, the
yeah,
Eagles should have been over when Glenn Fry died, but there's still
right.
an audience for those people to go out there and do that. And I know that, we're getting close to the end here, but when you brought up Tiny Dancer, I couldn't help but bring up the Friends episode is when
Oh
Phoebe
yeah,
says, "Hold me close now, Tony Danza." I mean, that is one of
yeah,
the, Tony Danza and yeah, and and what's the other one he had? Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Sugar Bear.
yeah.
I
Sugar
mean,
bear.
my mom called me that since I was a little kid. And of course, one of my buddies heard that one time. Your mom a big Elton John fan? I go, what do you mean? He goes, oh, that's Hold Me Closer. And not Hold Me Closer, but that's Someone Saved My Life Tonight. It's like, oh shit, is that where you got it? I mean, it's like, yeah, everything music. Music is just it to me. Music next to, if they say if you had to lose your eyesight or your hearing, what would it be? You can take my eyesight, I've seen enough stuff in my life, but never take my hearing because I want to hear music till I die.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's good. It's good to take these breaks and just talk about shit that makes us smile or interest us. We got to get back to that. I mean, there was a time before what we dealing with politics now where politics was just kind of an aside. Oh, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you suck. We want this, we want that. And then you'd move on to the more important things, your family, your entertainment or whatever. Um, so we've got to reinfuse some of that again so people can start to live their lives again as opposed to waiting on a perch for the next fucking shoe to drop.
And in the closing remarks, all I'm going to say is I'm going to go back to the words of the man I voted for the first time for president. And the left and the right can believe this too. I still believe in a place called hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always hope.
We'll see you
There's
next
oh,
week.
we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.